Thanks for tuning in to Minds of Tomorrow. I'm your host, Luis Acevedo, and with me today I have Holodonto. He is an artist and also the author of Cyborg Manifesto, and he's also a VR artist, which is really exciting to me. And so, Holodonto, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you very much, Lewis, to be invited. It's a pleasure as well. I'm looking forward to the discussion in the chat we're going to have.
Yeah, so am I. So, I was going through the article you sent me. I'm not sure what magazine it was from, but I read, you've had a lot of traumatic experiences in your life. When you were 12 years old, you had a collapsed lung. And then at 25, you had a brain injury. And, as I'm reading this and looking at your artwork and, looking at your perspective of the world, I can't help but think that those experiences have played a pivotal role in your artwork today.
Absolutely. And it's like, I've recently, in conjunction with the head injury that I had as well, I've been recently diagnosed with like ADHD, so I've got OCD and stuff that's kind of went under the radar, and because when I was a kid, kind of my behavioural patterns and that I wouldn't speak for ages. And when I did talk, I had an Italian accent, I could use chopsticks, and my mum and I'd always asked to be called David. And nobody would know why. And they were just like, where is this coming from? He's never used chopsticks or that before, and it's like when I, twice when I went on holiday, as you just said, I was bitten by a mosquito in the back of my calves, which basically impregnated the parasite into me, which collapsed my lung. And, kind of, it's like alien-esque, it's very alien-esque kind of stuff. Then when I was in uni, I went to Germany, to Braunschweig, which is a brilliant place. I really enjoyed it, but I ended up, in a bit of a physical fight trying to help a guy from London, and I was the one who ended up in hospital. I lost my hearing, like more than half my hearing. I've got debilitating tinnitus. It exacerbated my, existing thought processes as well, which are not always for the better. I've got lethargy, I've got sleep problems, and lung problems. So there's kind of a lot of, a lot of things have definitely influenced, my look on life and the way I see things, and especially in my artwork, as you can see, it's quite visceral in some ways,
Right. And something that came to my mind as you were saying that is, obviously you had to use technology in order to come out of those conditions and help you in some way. So is that where your intrigue of, the whole cyborg archetype comes in?
Absolutely not. I've but it's definitely influenced it. But since a child, since I've been a kid, I was growing up in the 80s. I remember like getting given Akira when I was 8 years old by mistake by a friend of mine, and it blew my mind. And just growing up and being fascinated by robots from the Transformers, to Jules and the Wheeled Warrior, which is kind of this biomechanical group of people fighting these vegetable kind of amalgamation creatures, so all this kind of stuff that I remember growing up in the 80s, and I'm a Game Boy boy, I grew up with the NES and all these kind of things, so all this kind of technology and was all just emerging, so like you can see in primitive digital art back in the 80s, like as the pinnacle of visual culture at the time, so this has kind of had a big impact on me. Especially when I was a child, I was soaking all this up. I was reading like Japanese manga. I managed to get a hold of it here, and I just completely obsessed with Japan. Obsessed with this kind of vision that they had in this post-apocalyptic landscape. And also for me, especially with the kind of mind that I have had, I always felt uncomfortable in my own body as a child, and like the kind of cyborg for me was a kind of a very powerful symbol, this kind of emblematic figure that could, make me bigger, faster and stronger, but also, not be afraid of the world, so this kind of Cyborg Cyborg or Optimus Prime kind of had this profound effect on me as a child,
I can imagine, for sure. And one thing that I've heard you say too is that the 80s is like the first digital age of like kids. And I heard you call them the first generation cyborgs. So what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
Well, for me, it's like the digital era kind of, for me, that the very early digital era for me is it's pure like the kind of AI cyborg, you know, narrative for me. Like the robots, I mean, robots have been with us since the Greeks. You know, the Greeks have always kind of, the concept of robot has always been there. But I think the digital age had kind of had this more, such a much more profound, and you know, the kind of the idea of like cyberspace and everything else is, and the visualization of cyberspace was much more profound than just a static robot, you know, a physical object. You know, there's this kind of this metaverse, you know what I mean? So for me, this kind of the Super Nintendo at the time, I always remember the adverts, you know, it's like all the grid systems. As you can see, like a lot of my art has always got grids in it. So this kind of, I was obsessed with this kind of grid-like structures or taking you to another dimension. So for me, this was kind of more, this was like more than just static robots. This was more cyborgian. This was more like something else, you know, a different world. So for me, that kind of, that's where I kind of see, you know, this kind of idea of the digital, the kids of the digital age. You know, it's me sitting with a controller being swooped into this landscape, you know.
Yeah. No, I can resonate with that. You know, growing up, I played a lot of video games, and I would always just be consumed into the digital world I basically lived in as a kid. You know, playing countless hours. So yeah, man, I resonate with that a lot, which is why I think that I gravitate towards these kind of topics, and I pick up on them kind of easily. It's like you know, I'm sort of, with a lot of my peer group, I'm like the only one that's really into crypto or NFTs or this transhumanist and futurist movement, new technologies. And I think it has a lot to do with, you know, the insane amount of video games I played as a kid, and, you know, just like you were saying. So
yeah.
Now
we've seen the internet. You know, we've
right.
seen the internet happen. You know, and that was, for me, was the embodiment of that advert. You know, sitting playing the SNES and just seeing special effects to portray it. When you've seen the internet, that was like, wow, hold on, what's this? You know,
right?
What is this thing? What is this amorphous thing of data? What is this going to do? You know?
Yeah, exactly. You know, I remember growing up, like, I'm only 25, so I was born in 1995. So the internet was around, but it was really coming into its own as I was able to actually use the internet. So growing up, I always had the internet too. And so it's been really cool to go from, you know, hearing those old AOL desktops, you know, loading up. You can hear the beep, bop, beep, bop. And then to now, where I'm here using this laptop, there's no noise. It's very, you know, quiet, and it's just super fast. And when I turn it off, I don't have some, you know, robotic woman telling me goodbye. You know, like, it's just amazing to see the development of where we've come from. So
absolutely, but I mean, I remember like it happening. You know, when it happened. You know what I mean? It's like when it was released. Having a Sega Dreamcast and running up a £250 phone bill in my mum's house, and she just went absolutely crazy.
Yeah. And now people are mining Bitcoin, raising the electricity prices up the roof, man. It's happening all over again, but just in a different way. Art just never stopped, you know? Now, I do want to ask, because I've heard you say that you identify with the cyborg.
Yeah.
How do you identify with it? Like, what do you mean by that? Like, because obviously you're not a cyborg, or maybe you have a different opinion on that, because, you know, I've spoken.
No, not at all, and it's a good question. I think that, well, you know, I think we've always been cyborgs. You know, okay. I don't think I think when people think about the idea of cyborg, they always go to this, you know, they always go to the Hollywood idea. You know, they always go there. You know, it's like Skynet, and it's like, it becomes tedious when you have to discuss that. But for me, the whole augmentation of humanity is cyborgian. The wheel, you know, to your spectacles, to what you wear, to the clothing you wear, is an idea of cyborg. You know, it's in our nature. You know, it's in our nature to adapt the materials around us. It's like alchemy. Do you know what I mean? You're taking these materials, you're building other extensions of yourself. The TV is an extension of your eyes. The computer is an extension of the brain. You know, so for me, it's like, you know, and especially as well post-brain injury. I mean, I've got a hearing aid, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like I've become a kind of postmodern Van Gogh. You know, it's like he cut his ear off. I just got a hearing aid. You know, I've got a cyborg part. So I mean, it's like a kind of I think when I say identify, sometimes I identify the idea of some sort of solitude. I think the cyborg is solitude. It's non-gender, it's got solitude. You know, it doesn't need, you don't need, it's not always a good thing, because as humans, we're communal animals. You know, we need this community. But I think the cyborg, and kind of the where I am at the moment with my work as well, I'm kind of away in a kind of speculative amorphous forms, you know, which are not even remotely even human anymore. You know, so it's kind of, you know, I'm kind of obsessed with the idea of the Matryoshka doll. And as you probably read about me, I've drawn continuous line, you know. Mm-hmm. So the continuous line is a big thing for me. And this kind of life is an ever-evolving, you know, system, which evolves, changes, and augments itself. So for me, it's kind of, I think when I say I'm identifying it, is I'm trying to identify with the image of it, and I will portray this image and create my story and my narrative around it, you know. So this is my universe. These are my archetypes that I'm creating for you. You know, it's just, I'm a symbolist. You know, I kind of identify with an art movement of the symbolist more than anything else. You know, it's like, you know, Marcel Duchamp, for example, was another. I mean, me and him have the same birthday. He had the bride stripped bare by her bachelor's even, which is basically a cyborg bride. You know, so it's kind of portraying this kind of evolution. And I think, you know, I'm a storyteller. You know, it's a complex imagination that I'm putting down. I mean, some of it is. It's not always easy to contain it in words. You know, it speaks for itself in its own way. So, I mean, for me, I could be quite cryptic and contradictory. Do you know what I mean about how I identify with the cyborg? Because one minute I identify with it, and then one minute I don't like it. You know, I don't know how I feel about it. You know, so there's this kind of uneasiness. But I think that's kind of the nature of Hallidonto at times. This is why I, you know, produce so many different kinds of imagery. I write. You know, so for me, it's, you know, it isn't just one set thing. It's a multitude of realities as to why I identify with a cyborg.
Yeah. So that image behind you, I've seen that one quite often. You know, when you visit your website, when you visit Instagram, you know, that's a popular one. So what's the name of that piece right there, and what are you trying to convey? I know, as we mentioned before, you know, art is subjective.
You're probably going to freak out. Well, you've seen when I made it into the kind of hive mind symbol, so it's my kind of symbol. And when I was, you know, during the pandemic, you know, I put a team together, and I've written an opera about cyborgs and transhumanism. But I ended up getting this costume and masks that I've made before, and I ended up becoming this avatar, you know, this kind of performance poetry. And it's kind of, you know, I kind of see that in a weird way, it's some kind of cult that I'm making. And I don't mean that it's not for a negative reason either, you know, but it's definitely quite ominous. And I kind of see, like, you know, it kind of goes back to, you know, my fascination with characters, you know, that, you know, and like creating my own characters. And this is like, you know, because as I said to you, I've been influenced by, you know, comics when I was a child, you know, fine art, and amalgamation of things. But I had to break away and identify my own kind of symbolic language. So this is the hive mind symbol, you know, the multiple heads. So this is kind of my symbol, you know, what I identify as.
Are you partial to the hive mind theory of the singularity, that will be the way we attain this technological singularity?
Yes and no. I mean, I think I hope that as potential organisms, that we have our own autonomy. You know, that we can actually break away and we can do what we like, but we do join together as a singularity to figure out ideas of energy, sustainability, sustenance, and stuff like that. But I would still do want autonomy, to be autonomous, you know, so I still want that. I don't want to be always joined with one hive mind, but I think collectively, again, going back to that kind of communal idea I was saying, as humans, I think it's a good thing to have. It could be a powerful thing to have.
Yeah.
And I've kind of incorporated this kind of idea into the opera, you know, like, I don't know, you know, Max Vita, Natasha Vita Moore and Max Moore. So they've kind of talking about, you know, freezing bodies, and they call them cephalopods. So I've taken kind of some of these concepts and some concepts from some physicists and created this machine, which is kind of a Cephalod mainframe computer. So in the Opera, it starts to glitch. So as it starts to glitch, all these memories come breaking out of the singularity, but they all become these kind of avatars. So it's kind of all about pathos, you know, still about the human idea of emotion. What is emotion? And we should still keep it, you know. And this is what we have to, this is what I want to explore. It's kind of influenced by my kind of take on Proust and Ovid, you know, with my own writing, you know.
That's very fascinating. So as soon as you said that, I thought of egregores. Are you familiar with egregores?
Yes, I'd like, this is how we're definitely going to be friends. So in my dissertation, I wrote about Erebors and Joris Karel Huysmans. So he's the aesthete, isn't he? You know, he goes on these trips and he goes to England, has a pint of beer. He's got the flowers that taste like dead flesh. I kind of put an idea of like him and Marcel Duchamp and myself are the same individual. You know, searching the symbolic ideal. You know. And it's a very fascinating book. You know, as the pretext for Picture of Dorian Gray. You know, that's where Oscar Wilde got the idea for that book. You know, so again, and it's a French symbolist book again. And as I said, it's like, have you heard of The Future's Eve?
I'm sorry?
The Future's Eve. Have you heard of that book?
I have not, no.
Well, this is where the term android first comes around. And the android's name is Hallyday, which is similar to my name, Halliday. You know, so it's kind of, you know, I've kind of punned that in a Duchampian sense when he does Rose C'est la Vie. So it's like, so I've done android like a Halliday. So I've kind of taken this kind of idea and run with this kind of idea. So the symbolist movement in Erebors is a definite fascination of mine. The book's fantastic.
I'll have to check that out. Future's Eve.
I'll send you some links to that list. I'll send you some links.
Yeah, if you could, that would be awesome. I love to read and I love to learn new things. So I would definitely check out this piece of work here. Now, as we were talking about the hive mind, I couldn't help but think, well, this is something that I've thought a lot about in regards to the transhumanist movement. And that is, they are simply trying to put what's this is my worldview, of course. They are trying to put the immaterial into the material. So what I mean by that is, if you look at like memory sticks, right? Yeah. Like you're trying to like get a material version of what a memory is. Like your laptop, your hard drive stores memories, etc. And we do that too, but where do our memories go? And so what I was thinking is, with your hive mind concept, we sort of already do that, don't we? If you have a family, if you have a tribe of people that you're very close with, you quite often get on the same wavelength as them, where you can think the same thoughts and not even communicate with them verbally.
Yeah.
My wife and I happen to do that very often, where I'm thinking something and then she mentions it and I'm like, it's so funny you say that because I was just thinking that too. And then we already both have the same answer to that problem or same thought process to work it out or something like that. So it's a natural human thing as well. So that's a perspective I think isn't really talked about much in this community, is that these things already exist, in my opinion. And so, you know, I'm not sure if you have any reflections on that.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, again, like I mentioned before, it's like the Matryoshka Russian doll, you know, a continuous generational thing. So this kind of it's a hive mind. Effectively. It's a hive mind, it's a continuous line, you know. So this kind of, as you said, that immaterial and material, you know, it's a kind, you know, it's how do you extrapolate the mind, the data of the mind, and how do you contain that? You know, this is like very fascinating because we can find the data of DNA, you know, and keep that and store that. How do you maximize this? And it's kind of, I was in a conversation with a friend of mine, Carol, who's like the head of Ravensbourne research for like to do with the brain and interfaces and stuff. And I was talking about, you know, like obviously the opera and like you mentioned memory. So this is up my street. It's all, I mean, the opera is all about memory, you know. It's all about memory and putting you through these series of scenarios, you know, pathos. But I was like, you know, to digress a little bit there. But for me, I was wanting to, never mind like mind upload. I'd love to be able to, right now for transhumanism, to extrapolate my tinnitus that I have, you know, remove it from my brain, you know.
Yeah.
How can I get, you know, how can I get rid of this? Because when sometimes for me with transhumanism, which is problematic for me, it's always about better. So what happens if it's just about fixing things, you know? and being as they are, you know. And this is kind of like with the opera for me is about disability, you know. People, I've become disabled because of a brain injury in many ways, you know, and people I know who are in, whether you're in a wheelchair, mental health, or whatever it is, instead of trying to make the body better, why don't you just fix how it is and let people live their lives? You know, that's a post-human. That's where I see a post-human view, and this is where, you know, I'm a transhumanist, but I'm more a post-humanist, you know, because for me, I think transhumanism can fall into the realms of eugenics sometimes.
Yeah.
Because who's going to control your body? You know, who's going to be the owner of your parts? You know, I don't want anybody to own my parts. I don't want my parts owned by Google. I don't want them owned by Apple. You know, this is my flesh. This is my body. I own it, you know. So wherever my memory is able to go, I have to be able to have ownership of that all the time. Then that'd be interesting as your memory on a blockchain, which is yours. You know, your own social.
I'm losing you.
You know, to do
Okay.
Yes.
I lost you for a good portion there at the end.
Oh no. Where did you get
So I really don't know, because you kept going in and out like for most of that.
What was the last thing that you had me say? Like from when it was clarity.
Yeah, so
what
we
was
were
the last
talking
thing?
about memory, the hive mind, and then you went into, you know, I remember specifically you talking about the DNA having memory, passing through it, and then I don't recall where you were just at though, because it was so broken up.
Right. I was kind of going into, you know, the problem is, I think what I was saying, what I find problematic with the transhumanist idea is it kind of could fall into the realm of eugenics, you know.
Yep.
And who's going to own your memories, and who's going to own your, you know, your genetic material? And I don't want to be subservient to any corporation, you know, because this is my substrate. I should be able to do what I want to do with it, however I choose. So, and if I was going to upload, if the memory thing happens, if, you know, because it's so far off. So for me, if it was, I would want my genetic materials or even my memory to be on a chain, you know, which would be on a chain which is accessible by who I leave it to posthumously, you know. So it can only be accessed by certain individuals, you know.
Right. And, you know, that's something I've thought a lot about too, in that how would you preserve that memory that's stored on the blockchain or whatever it may be that's specifically to you? And I think the perfect solution to that is smart contracts. Why wouldn't you be able to use a smart contract to store your mind data,
Yeah,
and be able to decide who can transact or interact with that smart contract? So that's a fascinating idea I've thought a lot about. Another thing that I've been thinking about, which ties back into the memories, and as you were saying, like who's going to have ownership of that? One of the things that I've been really curious about is if these things do come to fruition, how will this affect the generations that are born into it on an epigenetic level? You know,
yes.
like how, because their parents and grandparents, because this is like generations off. I don't see anybody uploading their mind in my lifetime. I just don't see that happening.
Not
So
yet.
exactly. I think we're so far away. You know, the internet is still so nascent. You know, it's still so new. Like it's the blockchain is just scratching the surface of what the internet can probably do. You know, we're just learning.
What I find fascinating about, you know, the blockchain, especially with the internet, right, is that everybody's like obsessed with fiat. No, it's not money. It can't be money. It's like, guys, money has no intrinsic value. We apply value to it, you know. So it's the same as data. Data's got more, this immaterial data has more relevance than this immaterial object that you're handing around, which really means nothing. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, you know, and why, and it's kind of weird because then there's this subservience to the fiat system. It's like, well, you're being, you know, it's like you're being controlled, you know. Like, why do you not want a currency that which doesn't, you know, which is borderless? You know, you don't have to worry. You know, you don't have to worry about this inflation. Whoever accepts it for food. I mean, you know, dare I say, I mean, the notion of money, which I've been in a few arguments before, I just think it's a nonsense concept after a while. It's just, you know, it's just ridiculous. You know, it's after a while you're kind of like, well, whoa, everything in the humanity for me just seems at the moment it's just markets. It's just always a market. It's just like a big supermarket of trade, you know, which we all need to eat. We all need to, you know, we all need to eat. We all need eating. That's more worthy than just material objects, you know. So bring on crypto, bring on blockchains. You know what I mean? Let's change the dynamic. Let's have a decentralized society. And I'm not getting utopian and going off because human beings, we're not going to have utopia. It's like there's always going to be struggles. You know.
Yeah, you know, and I think that the power dynamic will shift in favor, at least for a time, to the commoner with a cryptocurrency as opposed to the fiat currency. The chief reason for that is simply because you and I can build our own currency. We have the ability to be like, I don't need to rely on the federal government to make me money. I can literally make my own money, which is so liberating. And another thing, as you were talking about, which I feel a lot of people miss regarding the value, where's the value of money? Well, you know, you can say like with a dollar bill, you know, like, well, the value comes from the belief, obviously. That's all. Like you believe that the U.S. government or wherever you are, whoever's printing the fiat money is going to do right in that it's good. But other than that, it has no value. And one of the arguments that I've heard for crypto in particular is that it's immaterial and you can't do anything with it. You can't hold a cryptocurrency. While that's true, you can't at the same time hold love. You can't hold emotions. You can't hold memory, right? There's these things that you can't feel.
Concepts.
I'm sorry?
They're concepts.
Exactly, but we value memories. We value emotions. Like these things all have a value that's subjective, and currency works the same way, which is kind of funny that it's called currency because energy has a current.
I mean, absolutely. Does this keep crashing? Why do it keep crashing? Oh, exactly. You know, is this crashing again? Hold on.
You're frozen, but I can hear you.
I know. Hold on, mate. I'm gonna try. I'm gonna see if I can change this connection because this is really.
Okay. Yeah, take your time. Not a big deal.
That's fine, mate. I'm hoping this is like the connection here is awful. I don't know why it's so bad. You know what I mean? So I do apologize for this. So like you're saying, like memories and that are, you know, immaterial, but they're. I'm just trying to get this. Let's see this table here we've got. Right. Is that better?
We're pretty good at editing, so it's all good.
I've put on. I'm hoping Ethernet. I've put the Ethernet cable, so it should be faster. I thought my Wi-Fi would be better. So yeah,
Gotcha.
So like you were saying about, you know, memory, you know, applying value to these things, you know.
Right.
And it's like the argument I keep hearing as well. Yeah, but you know, like money is based on gold. It's like it's not been based on gold since fucking 1970. It's like what are you talking about? You know, it's like.
Right.
And I think now, like I kind of mentioned this in an article I'd done with the VR, saying like, you know, with digital technologies, and I was kind of alluding to the blockchain a little bit, and I was saying this is a renaissance for artists, you know, to actually to have sustainable living, you know, like to be paid for, because we're living, you know, Instagram, we're all living in materia. Do you know what I mean? This is where everybody is. You know, so this kind of notion of, oh, it doesn't have this tangibility. It's like, well, you're spending half your time in an intangible world anyway. So what are you worried about the tangible for? The only thing tangible you need is the light switch and that chicken drumstick or the bit of turnip you want to eat. So what do you need? You know, what's this dichotomy you've got yourself in? You know,
right? And you know, a lot of another thing too that I think a lot about are I'm not sure if you are familiar with, you know, the people who believe these crystals have certain powers, whether they be,
yes,
you know, keeping radiations away or helping conduct electricity or having better thought processes. Whatever your opinion on that is, there is concrete evidence that we have used some of these crystals throughout our, you know, pretty much our existence to conduct some sort of electricity, to transmit some sort of power. And there's a lot of theories on how that worked. But one of the arguments that I hear against cryptocurrency and the internet as it is today and the way that we're using technology is that, well, it's so manipulated and it's geared towards evil and it's trying to enslave people. But then I'm like, you know, those same crystals that you will argue that were in the pyramids that caused the electrical currents that people could transmit free energy. It's like, you know, that's the same stuff that's powering our computers as well, right? Like it's
yeah,
powering our
indeed.
computers. And mind you, I think that these things should be a public utility. So I do agree with them to that extent. However, I feel that we romanticize the past so much that we don't think that the same level of corruption that's happening today could happen then. And it's like you have no
The
clue.
printing press.
Sorry?
The printing press. The printing
Exactly.
press.
Yeah.
You know, there you go. Nobody could read. Some people couldn't read. They were told what they said. They believed it verbatim. They just went off and believed it. So this kind of like, yeah, I agree with you, this nostalgia about the past, like it was a great time. I look back and go, thank God I wasn't born then. You know, it's like,
Right.
it seems
You know,
awful.
I do struggle myself, which is why I can criticize it with romanticizing the past. You know, I am I'm very traditional in some of my ways and some of my worldviews. So you know, I struggle with that myself. However, the thing that got me out of that, you know, mindset is to just think, well, if we're having the same troubles today, and if I am of the, you know, philosophy or worldview that the world is sort of fractal, right? That things have patterns and they just kind of repeat themselves or rhyme. Well, if that's the case, then in the past they had to go through similar situations that we're going through just in their sort of sandbox of reality. And so then
Absolutely.
why do you romanticize the past then? You know, you're just romanticizing a piece of it as opposed to looking at the totality of the situation. But I want to touch on the Renaissance because you mentioned it that, you know, you think that we're entering in this new Renaissance. And when the Renaissance took place before, it was tied closely to spirituality and religion influenced it greatly. In this new
Yep.
Renaissance, I see this, and maybe it was the same way in the Renaissance, you know, the one everybody knows. So you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but what I'm seeing is this dichotomy in the Renaissance that I don't see in the past. And what I mean by that is I see people who are reimagining spirituality through their art and God as they did during the original Renaissance. But then
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, I see work where, and maybe you are incorporating spirituality, but I think of your work where it's sort of, in my worldview, it's doing away with humanity and replacing something and, you know, replacing it with something else. And so there appears to be this dichotomy in this Renaissance that's taking place.
See, well, for me as well, I kind of, with my work, I'm kind of like, I mean, red herring's not the right word. It's like, there's still a fear for me to be completely non-human, you know?
Hmm.
I mean, it's like I've always been human, you know, so there is this kind of, there is an existential fear, you know, of what would this being be, you know, what's it going to replace? And, you know, of some of the paintings that I've made, you know, you've seen one called, which is Adoration of the Magi, the cyborgs having babies, you know, and the baby
Yeah.
has come from the face, and it's got this kind of umbilical cord from the face, what I've done. Quite a very powerful image. you know, and so I've kind of, you know, play about with this, and there's like some of the other paintings is kind of this opodus thing where you see this cyborg baby, and then suddenly the next scene it grows, then the mother is throwing away another organism. So I kind of create these kind of when I say kind of, you know, Renaissance cartoons are actually Renaissance. So for me, this kind of there's a fear for me at the same time. I'm not pro, or I'm not unpro, you know, cyborg. It's like, I think it's inevitable. I think like the human with this extension of technology, it's going to happen. It's just happening. You know, I see like the human is not a fixed thing. You know, we're an unanswered question. You know, me and you are just sharing and occupying a space that you've just said, right? From the fractal idea, it's like an RPG game. Through every kind of, you know, evolution or technological evolution or atrocity, you know, humanity as a whole should learn from this, you know, and evolve and augment and change all the time. So for me, you know, when people talk about, you know, life's a simulation, that's kind of, you know, what I feel sometimes, you know, in this kind of Renaissance for me. When I say, like, you talk about the spirituality, I just think with the ideas of AI, quantum mechanics, quantum computing can maybe bring us closer to the idea of the fabric of the universe. But who's going to understand that? You know, some of the maybe the greatest minds don't. I mean, I'm not even going to profess to even know quantum physics. I understand. I know a bit, know nothing. It's fascinating, you know, like guys like James Lovelock and that, who are really, you know, when you listen to these guys, it's just another plane, you know. It's just like they're just on another level, you know. So it's like, but that fascinates me. It's kind of like, you know, taking the word God and for me, disassociating it from, you know, Christianity, Buddhism, and all these things. You know, I mean, for me, their philosophy is again part of the simulation, part of not the simulation in a negative way, part of the evolution of the human mind and how we understand the world that we're occupying. So for me, I just feel like, you know, my artwork is, you know, it's of its time. You know, it's of its time. It's before its time. It's ahead of its time. You know, it's relevant to the time that we're in. You know, but I went back. I go analog. If you know, a lot of my work's analog, and I did that deliberately. That was a deliberate choice, because it's still, you know, I'm portraying cybernetic beings, but they're all done in analog. They're all done in analog pencil. They're all done in analog materials. You know, and that was a purposeful choice to give you that kind of human-esque, that essence of the human, the essence of Hallidonto in that, you know.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I want to go back to the lines that are in your images a lot. When I was looking at it, and I want to hear your take on this.
Yeah.
I didn't put together that it meant that you were doing the endless, that it was just showing like this infinite progression, which I really like. But what I got what I sort of got from it is basically the inner works of a cyborg, like what I thought of as the wiring. Like if we are going to become cyborgs, well, then there will be some sort, you know, machines inside of us, and so that's what I thought you were going for in those images, but maybe not entirely.
For me, like I said, it's like DNA lines, you know, this kind of genealogy, ancestral thing. It's like, for me, it's, you know, it's just another again nano machine, you know, another evolution of the actual structure of like the sinew of the body. You know, it's kind of, you know, a lot of the stuff I did before were really stark one line drawings, you know, and the more that my work is maturing and evolving, the more that they have their own flesh, you know, they have their own flesh, their own essence, and this is just going to keep changing and evolving all the time. And, you know, and as I said in my own manifesto, you know, the cyborg will keep evolving throughout my epoch, throughout my time. You know, it'll change and evolve depending on the technologies I'm using. You know, I'm a polymath. You know, I use VR, I use portrait, I do performance. You know, I paint, I draw. You know, I'm in the production of making an opera. You know, so I've like, my brain works. You know, there's so many different factors to my work. It's not just, you know, cyborg, because there's some people go, oh, he's a cyborg artist. I'm not a cyborg artist. You know, it's like I'm a futurist. You know, I'm like the cyborg is my symbol. You know, and as I said to you, I made sure that my work has no point of reference to something like the Terminator. It's my own vision. It's my own universe. So the one line is is a technique that I have done since I was in college of life drawing. It's one of the things you learn in life drawing is the continuous line. It's gesture. It's all about essence. It's all about essence with the one line with me. And the Matryoshka doll is that essence and the continuous line. Life is continuous. It never ends. It never stops. When we're gone, it will still continue. So that essence of that line is my wormhole. Is my trail. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I like the philosophy behind that a lot. I really do. I want to hear your take on the metaverse, though. Like it's evolving right now, and people have said, as we're trying to articulate it and define it, a lot of very tech savvy people have basically said the internet is the metaverse, and it is nothing new. It's been with us since the internet has been. I think the internet was discovered. That's my own opinion. I don't think like we invented it. I think that everything here that we're using has always been here, and we're just finding ways to utilize that energy in different avenues. And I think the internet is a discovery as opposed to an invention. So, but yeah, like, what are your thoughts on the metaverse? Or you can even do reflections on everything I just said there if you want. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of like that. It's an interesting take. It's kind of when people talk about organic and inorganic, like synthetic. Yeah. It's made from the earth.
Exactly. I've made that argument too. Yep.
There's no separation. It's kind of like that anthrocentric idea, like we're kind of, the humans are separate from the world. You're not. You're not separate from it. You inhabit the space, Yep. We're all, effectively, you're in your own metaverse when you're born. You have no concept.
Yep.
You have no concept of reality. You're told, like, wherever you are in the world, you're told that, like, this is how you speak. So it's like this placebo thing. You're told how to talk to one another, unless you critically think about it and go, like, where did that come from? How is everybody doing this? I used to sit and think this as a kid. It was like, how are we saying these words to one another? Where did these words come from?
Right.
How am I here, and why do I not feel comfortable in this biomechanical suit that I'm inhabiting? So for me, this is kind of fascinating. And the metaverse, to me, again, as I said to you, it's another evolution of space. It's another evolution of space, of the mind. Mm-hmm. And dare I say, do you remember Second Life? Do you remember Second Life?
I've never played it, but I know what it is. Yes.
That was before NFTs, before blockchain. People were selling houses on the internet for millions of dollars.
Right.
So again, like you've said, the fractal count, it's an evolution of the same thing. Life is just another evolution. Like you said before, in the Victorian times, they didn't have a toilet until somebody plumbed it. But again, and we have a toilet now, which is standard practice. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's the same body, just the exterior becomes different,
Right.
So for me, the metaverse is just another place to manifest,
Yeah.
And a kind of, in a strange kind of way, it could be kind of esoteric. Think about the climate. I mean, at the same time, big data is big plastic, so we have to be aware of that, So, but at the same time, the metaverse and the kind of what we can do in that space can cut down, travel and emissions, even a climate level. You know what I mean? Just for people to conduct work, because the idea of work freaks me out about humanity. This obsession about going to work. What does that even mean anymore? I just you
look at when we were hunter-gatherers.
Yeah.
So they say, I don't know how true this is, but they say that we only worked hunting and gathering for about 4 hours of the day, roughly.
And then,
yeah, right. But I do feel that humans work because we try to find purpose. And if we're not working, I think that you see an increase in depression, or if you have too many options, you then get lost. I feel like that's a big problem with like my generation and the generation before me and after me, where that we have a plethora of things that we can try to learn and do. And because of that, I kind of think this is also why we have attention disorders, is because you're pulled in so many different directions because, I'm not innocent of it. I'm on Twitter a lot. I'm on Instagram a lot, as you've already mentioned, so, yeah, man, it's very fascinating how all these things work out and how they influence the mind.
But I agree with you, like when I say the nature of work, but I think it's like, for me, you know, especially grew up in Britain with the class system, right? So the arts has never been for you, you know, it's always for the bourgeois, you know, and
Right,
I'm
right.
not having that, because this is where my gears are. So don't mind if I say this, but fuck you. I'm not doing the labouring job because you want me in a pecking order. You know, I've met people here who have come from privilege who think they're artists and they're no artists. I work every day, 24 hours a day, all the time. You know what I mean? And this is what I want to do. This is my work. You know, this is. So I think when it comes to the idea of work, people should have a choice what work they want to do. You know, and obviously, you know, there's certain things people can't do if you're not qualified. You know, that's fine, because that's where you learn. But everybody has the capacity to learn, and everybody has the capacity to learn in their own way. And this is what we're learning now of how diverse the brain is. Right? Me, I never stop when it comes to creativity. Right? I paint, I draw, do. That's how my brain works. Right? I can come up with stuff. That's how it works. So this is my value. This is my contribution to the metaverse and the physical verse that we're inhabiting. Right? And this is what I want to do. I don't want to do anything else. You know what I mean? I'll sit there and learn Blender. That's what I'm sitting every day at the moment. Blender, oil painting. Blender, oil painting. Phone calls talking about an opera. So this is, you know, I want the ability to choose my reality, not dictated to me by the powers that be, you know. And it's not against, I don't mind order, but I don't like being told I'm working class, which I've always had. The arts aren't for you. You know, it's always never for you, you know. So fuck you. I want to choose my art. That's what it is to me. That's what gives me relevance and sustenance in my life and makes sense to me.
Yeah.
My art is how it helps me deconstruct and reconstruct my reality and gives me my sense of worth. So I agree with you that we do work, but we should be able to choose the work that we do, not be exploited and dictated to, you know.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I really do. And I will say, though, that, I will challenge that. So I agree to an extent that I do feel that there are things that we should do, even if we don't want to do. For example, you know, in my mind, I think, and I'm working on this, so, and I've grown my own food before, but in my mind, I think that all humans should grow at least some of their own food, whether that be raising their own livestock or having a vegetable garden, you know, like, but maybe that's something you don't want to do. Like, I'm not a green thumb, so to speak, but I can grow my own food. I've done it. You know, the old house that we lived at, we had a nice big garden. You know, I've grown food inside and things like that. But, you know, so there's things you know, basically, if we're in a society, we got to participate in that society to a certain degree.
I love this.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I love what you've just said there. I mean, like you think about, you know, I live in London, right? So the boroughs that you have here, right? If the community were growing their own veg, there's an exchange value going on here, you know.
Exactly.
Mr. Smith's got a load of carrots. I've got tatties. You know what I mean? It's like, and people are like, oh, this is going back to the dark ages. It's like, no, it's not. It's sustainable. You know.
Exactly.
You know, this is sustainable, and I like that. I think that's a great idea that we should learn to do that. You know, be growing stuff and not relying on corporations where food is being wasted by the dozen.
Exactly.
And people, you know, you can maybe say if I'm wrong here, but portion control of what people are eating should happen.
I shouldn't be the one talking about portion control.
No, but I mean, it's like, you know, no, but you know, we all like to eat, but I mean, there's people in the world who don't have the opportunity to fucking eat, and that's scary, you know.
Yeah, you know, I really think that, you know? I'm optimistic about the future. I think that good things are going to happen.
Yeah.
However, I believe at the same time we're going to go through a lot of hardships as we go into this new age, if you will. I know that's sort of a cliche that's being thrown around, but we are entering in this new era of humanity, and a lot of people, I feel, are asleep at the wheel. They don't see what's going on. We have so many revolutionary technologies that are displayed right now, and they are just in their infancy. And as they develop, we're going to then question the necessity for global supply chains the way we do now. We're going to then question the size of nations, I believe. I don't think that we're going to become globalized. I don't believe that. I think that's nonsense. I think what's actually going to happen and what's more natural is reducing the size of our nations. And what I mean by that is like going back into more tribal, more communal environments where
Yep.
As I mentioned, you're well, actually, as you mentioned, where you can do bartering systems with your neighbor. With hey, I grew a tomato, you have a chicken. You want to trade me an egg for your tomato? So, like, not saying that we're going back to the dark ages necessarily, as you basically said, but I feel that we're going to have to do a lot of reflection as to where we're going
Yep.
and how do we actually sustain our lifestyles, because we're going to be consuming a ridiculous amount of energy as we progressively develop this blockchain technology that will eventually, people say
Yep.
software consumes everything. Blockchain's going to eat up everything, man. And all these other,
Yeah.
blockchains that are being developed are going to, be able to host everything that we do in the physical world as well. So, I'm of the mindset that people are going to choose smaller communities and then come up with their own. I think city states are going to be a big thing. I think city states are making a
Yeah.
comeback. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Smart cities, smaller smart cities.
Yeah, yeah. I think some city states will be smart cities, and I think others will not be, because I am a part of a few communities that are very antagonistic or um, uh, or just choosing not to. So it's a part of antagonistic and I don't want to say ambivalence, but it's more so like I don't want that. So
No.
that are against some of the technologies that are developing right now. So I'm sympathetic to those arguments, and so that's why I say I don't think that all the smart cities will be. I mean, all the city states will be smart cities. I think that there will be city states that will be more of your like traditional lifestyle. But then you're going to have your smart cities, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Of
will be
course.
city states. So these are fascinating things that I'd like to ponder. And I think that you know, uh, in your art, a lot of your artwork is showing this. It's illustrating this bifurcation that's happening with humanity, if you will.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think at the same time, like within the work as well, there is a sense of the community. There is this coming together of what it means to be human, and not forgetting that. There is this kind of pathos that I'm displaying, and like especially now with the series, as I've said about the biomorphs, these are all individuals, but they're all part of a system. They all either benefit one another or not. And it's like they all have their own personalities. They're all part of something. So for me, at the same time, is I still, as a human and as the artist I am, I still crave human connection. I need it. I need it as an individual, as an organism. Without it, by extension, without it, who am I?
Right.
I'm only my thoughts. After that, but after, by extension, you're known by others. And we need that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Certainly. Now, as you said, you're a polymath. You do a bunch. Now, the opera that you are creating, what is that about exactly? And what's the name of it?
That's a post-human punk statement against classism. So for me, that's where I'm coming from. For me, being a working class guy, and I hate the word working class, I hate the term, but being a working class guy brought up in Dundee in Scotland, which is a post-industrial town, the arts, and especially opera, was never accessible. I was fascinated by opera as a kid, just when my gran would just sit and watch it. So the more that when the pandemic happened, I was like, how am I going to do this? And my friend, who was a good friend of mine, my producer, went, start writing that script. So over the whole of the pandemic, I assembled a team of about 12 very bright individuals, and I wrote an opera, which is a physical opera and a metaverse opera. So within the opera, this is the baseline, I want to employ people from working class, ethnic minorities, and disabled backgrounds. And looking at this as posthumanism, a practical and pragmatic posthumanism statement, about sustainable futures, knowing that the arts is going to be one of the most lucrative careers that you'll have within the advent of AI. You know, it's like, I don't know if you've read the book, Max Tegmark, Life 3.0. I mean, he talks about this. I'll give you this as well. I'll list this for you as well, Lewis. And he was talking about, you know, the arts is where it's at. And like, look at it now, if you want to take the NFTs, you know, this is the beginning of it, you know. So when you ask me about the metaverse, you know, I've written this opera, which is 2 pieces. So the physical piece uses sensory technology, which will be used in the VR version. It's all about the senses and disability and losing it. But talking about what it means to be human in a technological world. So for me, again, instead of just talking about theory and speculating, I'm thinking about the arts as a job, you know, as a job, and what it means to be an artist, and people who don't have opportunities to be in this, to have access to this, you know. And like when you spoke about your own sort of system, I want to build the opera in the metaverse, which will be a place for people to come, symposiums, learning. Can't say too much after that, but this is what I want to do. You know, I want to take a real pragmatic approach to post-humanism and actually and use the arts to bring these conversations to the populace and to the general populace. You know, for me, I kind of get afraid that post-humanism, transhumanism will just drift into the spheres of the intelligentsia academia, where it doesn't become accessible. And this is wrong. You know, the whole, you know, Renaissance art in its essence was made by the bourgeois, but it was meant to be accessible for the public to understand the concept of divinity, etc., etc. So for me, it's bringing, you know, my empirical experience of posthumanism, my art and my vision, but bringing people in a team to create something, you know, which is new and generating jobs and generating sustainable incomes. You know, that's fundamentally what I'm trying to do. You know.
Wow,
and the opera has never been, you know.
Yeah, man, that's really amazing. I like what you were saying there a lot, because I do feel that a lot of these topics are, I don't know if it's intentional or if it's just a communication gap going on, but I feel that a lot of these topics, people who have no experience in academia, are, you know, aren't of a certain intellect, if you will, they sort of feel like they're left out. But as you were saying, I don't feel that they, like, I feel like, I don't know if it's on purpose or not. What do you think about like these movements? I feel that they are almost intentionally complicated, overly complicated to keep out.
I think sometimes it can sometimes boil down to basic academic masturbation. People just want to use, you know, be verbose for the sake of being verbose, instead of just actually, you know, saying things straight down the middle and saying, like, this is the position that we could be in, you know, this is what we're trying to think about and how we're going to, you know, what we're going to do about it, or what we're going to think about, you know. And I know a lot of brilliant minds, like you've met yourself, me, one of the people I've met, Francesca Farnado, one of the leaders of post-humanism, a fantastic woman, honestly. She would sit you down, like anybody who'd want to talk about post-humanism, and go from the most basic, no, not even basic, but she'll just nail it for you. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. She'll bring it right down, and she describes it and makes you engage. And I think that's sometimes the problem with academia. It's not engaged. It's not engaging people. They kind of, like, you know, they just get turned off by it. And again, people sometimes, you know, think, oh, I'm not smart enough, or I'm not this or not that. It's like, sometimes it's not about that. It's just, if you, some of the language is so dense, you know. I mean, I've read some of these heavy books, and some of the books I'm like, you know, and you're just like, right, hold on, you know what I mean? And again, you know, philosophy is all subjective anyway. It's like, you know, it really is, you really got to take what you want from it. You know, I've been about really, what is it, you know, apart from my own sort of universe that I'm creating, what do I want to give back? You know, what do I want to give back, and what project I want to do? It's going to have, you know, meaning. And it's not about, you know, I'm the artist, it's my hubris, you know, but actually contributing to society, you know, with the arts, and bringing these prevalent topics which are in the ether now. You know, like when I was painting Cyborgs in 2008, people are going, what are you talking about? What are you on about? And now I'm getting phone calls, people going, oh, you were right, you were bang on, you were correct. You know, now they want to speak to you. So it's like,
that's usually how it goes, man, when you're a trailblazer. Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, it's, you know, I really want to bring, like, because this affects us all. You know, this is not just for like the institutions. You know, and I want to decentralize that. You know what I mean? I want to decentralize that and bring these stories. Like the opera is set in a universe, but the ultimate fundamental stories is about the senses, pathos, and what it is, and who you are, and what you're allowed to feel in a world that is technological, and what you know, not what you should feel, just be. You know, who you are. There's a lot to unpack in this story. There's so much stuff that I put in this, and all these things you'll go through. It's like, you know, Proust. It's like you read Swann's Way. It's about everything, but it's about nothing. You know, the details, the sweets that he's eating, the tea he's drinking, the light coming through the windows. That's what I'm doing with this opera. It's just it's full-on experience for you to sit there and go. It's like every transaction in the day you have is an experience. Everything is an experience. Sometimes you don't even sit down and think about what you've just experienced in a day, from the thoughts in your head to what you're smelling, to the light coming, to the paint that I put on, you know, to the thing I'm building in 3D. You sometimes even think about it, and you should sometimes sit there and just think about it and go, what is this? What am I in here? What am I experiencing?
Yeah,
and that's the fundamentals of post-humanism for me. You know.
Yeah,
it's the essence.
I really get this sense of the non-duality, you know, philosophy in what you're describing here. Has that influenced you at all?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm definitely. I mean, I'm defiant. You know, I mean, I don't have any. I don't try to ascribe to any sort of side. It's kind of, you know, I could be problematic. I'm argumentative. I'm romanticist. I'm everything at one minute. You know. So I mean, so definitely, it is a non-duality. You know, I think that's, you know, as I said before, you know, just to reiterate, it's like we're an unanswered question. I'm an unanswered question. Will I even understand who I am until my death? Probably not. But I'll make sure that my memories are there for posterity, and that is what my art is. These are my memories. You know, I'm sealing my memories.
Yeah. So do you think that that old line of "know thyself" is bullshit?
I don't think we ever do. It's like you could be a million people in one day, you know. And I think that's the interesting thing about, you know, say the internet, or, you know, like your arts and that. These are all extensions. They're all extensions of yourself. You know, they're all just other tools of the personality. There's not one defined idea of the personality of the person, you know.
Wouldn't you say, I want to challenge this a little bit. Wouldn't you say, though, that there is an overall pattern, regardless if there's different expressions of what you're doing? There's a certain pattern, like, you know, like I mentioned to you, I write poetry as well as yourself. I like to write short stories, and I agree with you. They are extensions of myself. They bring out different sides of my personality and how I view the world in a multitude of ways. However, you can always see a pattern that's throughout any artist or any creator, that they have this, that's them.
Yeah. The signature marks.
Yeah.
And I don't mean just, you know, the signature marks. And I think, yeah. But again, when you say about a writer or an artist, these are external. You know, you don't see the signature mark. You know,
Fair.
But yes. people who know me, or people who I know, like friends of me, will go like, "No, not anybody like you." You're fucking bonkers. Right. So how do I take that? Do I take that with a negative spin, or do I take it with a positive spin? You know, so it's like I can only be me. You can only be you. Do you know what I mean? It's like and it sounds very basic and arbitrary, but it's just like sometimes there's no other definition. You just, you know, you're inhabiting this body, and that's who it is. You know, and like I've sat there and contemplated, going, what am I doing? What am I doing here? Who am I? You know,
I resonate with you, though, when you're like, I don't know if you'll ever know yourself, because I do feel that there's a lot of mystery in life. And I think that what's taking place right now is I think it always takes place, actually. You know, we're trying to demystify what is on demystifiable, if that even makes sense.
Absolutely, I
Yeah.
completely agree.
It's like enjoy the mystery, enjoy not knowing, like be comfortable in your ignorance, because I don't think ignorance is a bad thing either.
No,
It
no, I
allows
think
you wonder.
sometimes you, I think sometimes you need it.
I
You
do
know,
too.
it's just like, think about like society when you, like you said, like, you know, okay, like you go and you get a job, right, and it's like you're stuck with these people that you wouldn't by your very definition want to be friends with these people, but sometimes you've got to be stuck with these people, and you can, you know, demystify it to the point, just go, no, this is just, I've just got to do this for this moment in time, and I've just got to get out of here. You know what I mean? You've just got to move on. You just got to keep moving on, keep moving, keep doing things, keep learning things, keep creating things. And I think that's one of the key things about, you know, about life and the mysterious. Thank God that I had art. You know what I mean? It's like as a tool. You know, because it's not just, you know, a job. It's not. It's my way of my life. And like you say, that maybe is this. That's my signature. You know, that's what gives it definition. That's what gives it value. You know.
Well, yeah, I mean that appears to be the essence of your work, is the just the continuation, the never ending. Even when you die, I mean, your work is still going to be out there, and somebody can be inspired by your work and continue it in a way in their own, you know, perception.
Yeah, indeed. And I mean, I was like, was it 2 years ago? It was really profound. It was a beautiful moment, actually. I was asked to go and present my Cyborg Cadavers poetic piece, which I'd done at an exhibition. And so I walked in, and there was this young guy in the gallery, and I was like, "Excuse me, mate, I've got to go here." He's like, "Oh, just go over there." And he wasn't exactly the most pleasant of people, to be fair. And so as I went up and spoke, and I come walking down, and he went, "You're Hallidonto." And I went, "Yeah." And he went, "Your manifesto saved my dissertation." I just gave him a hug. And he's like, "I should hug you." I went, "No, you don't understand, you know, how much that meant to me, you know,
Yeah.
already that people were seeing it and it's having an effect, you know, because the way I present that, the one, the Royal Academy, it's full of emotion, you know, it's coming from my brain injury, and like you brought at the start, you know, my empirical view and everything else about what my place is in the world, and, you know, the continuation of what my work is. And for somebody to acknowledge that and say that to you, it was kind of like, wow, you know. And you know, I'm just having to get things out of my head, and you don't actually realize, like you say, the effect that you can have on people,
Yeah.
you know, whether it's good or bad, you know. But it's like, it's exciting, you know, it's profound. It's, you know, I agree, you know.
Yeah, you know, I've experienced nothing like that, but similar when I used to do a lot of live streams on Facebook, more geared towards the political world,
Nice.
because I felt I could bring a refreshing perspective in that we put too much emotion into these. Essentially, they're actors. We put too much emotion into the actors when you should be putting more focus and attention into your own life and what you can do. Stop looking at other people to, hey, show me the way. Can you, you know, like some people in America were looking at Trump as their savior. And mind you, I'm very open about it. I voted for Trump in 2016. I didn't vote for Trump in 2020. I didn't vote for anybody in 2020, actually, because I sort of broke my own illusion. I was like, this is just a binary. This is a false binary. Like I can choose myself. I can choose myself and God and just like do my own thing.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of like the message I was trying to bring to people. And even with other of my, you know, like this podcast and other podcasts, I've had people reach out to me like, man, you know, like you've helped me, like, thanks for saying those things. Like, you know, you helped me in a certain way, or, you know, the guest that you had on the show was really amazing. And, you know, they've helped me see things in a different way. So, you know, I resonate with that a lot. And I actually want to go back to how you got started in all of this. So, like, what actually inspired you to become an artist? Like, has it, like, I assume it's been in you since childhood, because for me, you know, I actually never shared this on the show. So you'll be the first guest to hear it. And this will be the first time anybody hears it on the show that doesn't know me personally. Like, when I was a kid, I think I started writing raps. Like I would write full songs, like
Nice.
verses, chorus, verse, like full, like three
Yeah,
verses,
yeah.
three choruses. And I would do that every day when I got home from school and before school. I would write like several raps, like full songs, and like every day. And like since like the age of 7 until I was about a senior in high school. So I have a large collection of like, raps, and
Love
I
them.
would even do little folders, right? I even had folders of how I would do the mixtapes and how I would like number
I
the
love
album,
it.
like what
Love it.
song would be what, and like how I would name the songs, the title of the mixtapes, all that stuff. So, as an artist myself, I
Love
know
it.
that I couldn't really tell you what inspired me to do it, but I just felt it naturally to just do these things. So I don't know if it was similar for you, or was there like this event that took place that was the catalyst for your work?
Um, well, since I was a kid, I always wanted to be an animator. I was always obsessed with animation. Like I said, this is what I was like, watching, and I was like, I used to get the wallpaper out of my mum's cupboard and draw, but it'd be like, it'd be like action drawing. So I'd be drawing and doing the noises as I'm doing it. So it was this kind of performative aspect that I would do. Then when I got to about like high school, I remember like, and I got bullied, you know what I mean, from a few people for liking manga for a bit, right? So I kind of went through this kind of being ostracized stage because the things that I liked, nobody liked. Do you know what I mean? And it was just kind of, that's what it felt like. So I kind of went the opposite way for a bit. I turned into a kind of a trouble kid, you know what I mean? I was like, getting in a lot of bother. And I remember like one point where it was, I was on taking drugs, and it was like this moment where my mum coming to this house and says, like, you've got an option, Graham. You ever get out of this house, like where you are, or you go down this route. And I was like, well, I'm not staying here because this is not me either. This is just not happening. It just isn't happening. I'm just following the line, and I'm just, because I'm frustrated. So then the next thing, I was like, my mum says, well, you need to do something. You need to get a job, or you need to do this. And I was like, well, I want to go to college. So I went to college, started off, and I could always like draw. I could always able to draw, but I just started off at the bottom. I was just like, with my tracksuit bottom, sitting there, and they're going, and I'm like, all right, a bit moody, right? So, and it was just like, and then when I went there for the first year, I was like, yeah, this is what I should be doing already. And I ended up going to college. I'd be there from 8 o'clock in the morning to 9 o'clock at night. I would do life drawing at night, and I was totally gone. I was like, this is what I went to do. I went to uni, and then it was like one of my lecturers, who's a very like prominent watercolorist, and he always said to me, I always remember this. He went, he says, you're kind of one of those conceptual artists. You can draw, but there's a lot of gears going on inside your head. It's not just making marks. And I was like, and it always stuck with me that. And it was like when I went to uni, and I was like, I got more into philosophy. I was really into reading philosophy, and especially like Jean Baudrillard and the kind of postmodernist. I was really into that deconstruction, hyper reality. And then I was like, this is what I'm meant to do. This is who I am. But when I had the head injury, it was weird, because one of the drawings that I'll send you, you can see, was no exit, which is this continuous line drawing of this figure. And this is when I had the head injury, and this is when I was like trying to figure out, because I was a severe brain injury. I was like, who am I? Who am I anymore? I don't know who I am. I've lost my hair, and my personality's changed. I don't feel comfortable again. It was all this kind of amalgamation. But this figure, this drawing, was the turning point for me. And that's when I went, my work's about cyborgs. And it just, like that, I went, my work's about cyborgs. And that's what it's going to be. And this is what I'm going to be known for. And I just went on this like mission. I was just like, this is what I'll be known for the art that I'll be known for. And ever since that drawing, that is like when that head injury and when that happened, that was when I was like, I was always an artist, but then I knew what my art was, what it will be and how it'll evolve and what it is now, So I've always been an artist, but I mean, it's just the only thing. It's just the thing that just makes sense to me. It's the only thing that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I cannot. If you cut my arms off, I'd still draw with a pencil in my mouth. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, this is who I am. This is what it is. This is what it is. And the cyborg is the symbol. You know what I mean? And I know that my work is relevant to the time that it's in.
Yeah. No,
And I
I couldn't
believe,
agree more. And I love the way that you say it's before its time, for its time, and ahead of its time, because whether people realize it or not, the now, the present encompasses all of those things already.
absolutely. You know, I mean, it's like it's, you know, like I said, it's like when I done the talk with animatronic in my hometown. I was invited to the V&A in my hometown, which was quite amazing. You know, it was just like to go away and be invited to come back. Then, you know, like Anna, me and her were talking about her fascination with robots, going back to like Greek and the Japanese, and I was saying, you know, like the quote I said from my manifesto, and she says, "You're absolutely bang on. It's always been there. It's always been there. You know, this kind of this extension, this kind of Lacanian kind of figure, you know, this embodiment of this being has always been with us, you know, and it just keeps changing. And it's, you know, this is this, you know, it's like you said before, and I completely agree. It's just this kind of regurgitate, but evolve and become something else. You know what I mean? This, you know, like I think my work's becoming more amorphous. You know, these beings are becoming like, you know, even more less human at the moment, and this is kind of where I'm at. You know, and I'm, like the stuff that I've been writing is, you know, like the poetry you've seen, the performance stuff is very kind of visceral. You know, it's kind of very existential. You know, it's makes you kind of feel. I don't see like you feel a bit uneasy, but at the same time, there's a bit of light there as well. It's not all dark. People think when I'm writing, it's always dark. You know, but it's not.
You know, it reminds me of. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I appreciate music. I really love music. Black metal. In
Right.
that,
Okay. Never, never a genre I would listen to, but that's interesting.
yeah, and the reason why I compare it to it is because if you look at the lyrics, like the lyrics are indecipherable. You know, you can't decipher them while they're singing it. But if you actually go pull up the lyrics, they're talking about really powerful stuff that anybody can resonate with. And the music, though, doesn't give you that feeling
No.
because it's like very intense, very dark. But beneath that darkness, there's this light that's like if you just like give it a chance and accept it, it'll I think it'll do you good because either way, even if you don't accept it, I think it'll do you good in that it'll show you, you know, the things that you're afraid of because you put your imagination
Yeah.
into.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
like
no,
you
I
put
totally,
your
I
own fear.
without a doubt.
Yeah.
It's like it's weird. It's interesting to black metal because like my musical choice is, you know, first and foremost, it's house music. But I love
Okay.
classical music. I love like Eric Satie. You know Eric Satie.
I do
Like
not know.
I'll send you. It's beautiful. He's a Scottish French composer. Basically, he's the precursor for jazz. You know, Eric Satie. Like when I done my thesis, was Eric Satie, Joris, like Erebors, James Joyce, and Marcel Duchamp. You know, all kind of pioneers in the way they were kind of articulating the time that they were in. And for me, it's like when I write my poetry, I imagine my work to Eric Satie. You know, and when I send you the song, it's like it's classical, and you just hear that kind of flesh, your flesh. It's quite become even more sinister. It's like, and I don't know why. It's kind of I'm kind of, you know, for me, I'm really again, it's like Baudelaire, Rimbaud. These are the kind of Marlamar, the poets that really kind of resonate with me. You know, it's kind of that decadence, but you know, kind of like with the symbolist, it was all about, you know, showing the opulence, you know, revealing the opulence. Whereas my cyborgs at the time, especially the earlier, like the larger paintings, were all about, you know, the inside, and it was rotten because it was having this, you know, existential inquiry about the flesh and about my flesh and the body, you know. So I kind of resonate with this kind of French writing. It kind of really sticks with me, you know, especially the Baudelaire, you know, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Baudelaire for me, you know.
Yeah. You know, music, I think, really influences people in a lot of what they do. You know, I tell my wife, I'm like, you can tell a lot about a person what music they listen to. Like, whether they know it or not, you can tell because they're listening to that music because they see, as with any form of art, themselves in it.
Yeah. I would agree. I would agree. I
Yeah.
mean, for me, like the most phenomenal soundtrack ever for me is the Akira soundtrack. Like the Akira animation soundtrack, especially the last one, Requiem, because I had PTSD after my brain injury. I couldn't cry, and I had this noise in my head, and I was tired. You know, I'd left, and I couldn't cry, so I was getting like MRIs when I was back in Dundee. I remember coming home, and my girlfriend went back to uni, and I was like, I'm going to go, you know, into the house. I'm just going to go to my house, and so I'm sitting in my house, and I put on the CD, and this song, like, it's like 40 minutes long, and it's like, it's just epic in every single name of the every fathom of that word. You know, it's just epic. And I remember it just triggered a release, and I could just feel the tears coming down my eyes, and it was like I've never felt a feeling like that before in my life. You know, and it was just I was exhausted after it, but this kind of release, you know, that it gave me, and it because that movie for me was a childhood movie, and it's still my favorite film to this day. It's had so much of an impact in me, you know. It's just like the music to the antagonist who I identify with more, and that movie just triggered like my childhood, all these memories, you know, right to the forefront, and then just like right out of my eyes, and I could feel them coming out my eyes, and it's this kind of like transcendence, you know, that I felt when I heard that, and it gave me the release that I needed, you know.
Yeah.
And no song has ever done that to me. Every time I put that song on, I'll always have tears in my eyes. It's so
That's
powerful.
amazing. You know, art is a beautiful thing, and I don't think it get really. I truly believe that it doesn't get enough credit in all of its forms, and especially the work that you do, the particular art that you do. I feel that there is this mass, you know, we are so critical to art these days. I feel like actual like paintings and visual artwork, you know, and I get it, because you got, you know, a banana that's duct taped to a wall that'll sell for an absurd amount of money, and that seems insane. However, you know, you can make arguments as to why that happens, but I'm sorry.
I can, and I definitely will after you speak. Let's go for it.
Yeah. So like, you know, like, yeah, just, I feel that it's important that we start making, you know, these conversations. Well, let me backtrack a little bit, because my mind's going in a million directions. As you said earlier, the art was meant for, as you were told, the upper class people, right? The people with wealth. But in reality, art is for everyone, man. It like tells the story of life. And that's something that we're missing, I feel. I feel like there's a huge disconnect between the average person and your, if you will, by average person, I simply mean your working class, your person who's like, you know, a really good man, a really good woman. You know, they do what they have to do to make ends meet for their family. You know, they're honorable in society. But a lot of them, I feel, don't actually see the value in art and see what art can do for them.
I completely agree, because you're conditioned it's not for you, but you'll just go and buy the record from the homogenized culture. You know, you're going by that record, and that's culture. You're told that's culture. Why is it, you know, like when I went to school in Dundee, and when I went to school in Scotland, you got art for 1 hour. You didn't get, you know, you didn't get Latin, you didn't get told Latin. You got a bit of English, but you were kind of geared to whether be. You remember people saying it, going, "Oh, you'll probably be a bin man, or you're going to be, you know, you might be lucky you'll go to uni and be a solicitor." And I'm like, what? You know, it's like, why? You know, and this is why I've always been defiant about, you know, my art. I mean, I remember when I was at uni, I mean, at like 20 odd years old, I mean, I walked in the pub with my dad and that would drink, and I'm like, art. And I'm like, and always being this kind of anomaly. And I was like, I'm telling you, this is, you know, it's like I've got to get out. And this is why I'm making an opera, you know, an opera which is a cyborg and video game opera. People are like, what? And I'm like, because I want to challenge myself, and I want to bring art to the people, you know. And this is what my work's about. It's for the people. I've always made it for the people. You know, it's, you know, I'm not. I speak like I can speak intelligently if all I like as well, but I mean, it's like it's all about connecting people. We all share the same space. You know, art has been there, and this kind of, like you say, this disconnect that art is, you know, is something that's separate. It's not. It's all part. Everything's connected into one another. Nothing is separate. You know, we all share it. It's like when you hear people going, there's no money in art. It's like, well, put your DVD away, turn your Netflix off, put your newspaper, your book away. Then what do you have when you put all that? What do you have when that's all gone?
Right.
Oh, right, yeah, you forgot, because that's all fucking art, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's just like...
And then you would probably create your own art, just because humans create art.
Yeah, it's what you do by extension. You mark make, you communicate, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, it's storytelling, you know what I mean? It's like, this is what we do. It's just like, this part of who we are. And this is what annoys me, and the people have always said, art isn't a job. You're like, there's no money in it. It's like, that's nonsense. You know, it's complete nonsense. And again, this is what I liked with the NFTs, but what annoyed me about the NFTs is that they were seeking validation from institutions. It's like, you're fucking getting this wrong. What are you doing? Why do you need Christies to tell you you're good? Fuck them. You know what I mean? Where do they become the purveyors of taste? What do they know? It's like, I mean, for me, it's like I'm still kind of, it's weird. I'm in this weird space where I'm known, but not known. You know, and the work that I'm in, it's like, it's not hubris here. The work I'm doing is relevant. It's not just, I mean, I've seen so many things in the NFT space, and that, the banana, if you wish. I mean, if Marcel Duchamp was alive today, he'd probably just go, they've not got any further forward. You know, because I mean, is it satire? Okay, but I mean, it's not good satire. Is it questioning what art is? I don't think we need to question what art is now at the moment, because when people understand Duchamp and that were responding to mechanical reproduction, you know, which was, you know, what was the art object if a machine can do it, which is interesting. So for me, the flip side of me is drawing cyborgs with paint and pencils. You know what I mean? And going the backwards against the digital at times.
Yeah.
You know, and now I've embraced the digital a little bit. So I kind of like to play about with this. But then I started seeing people putting a red pixel and thinking they're Malevich. And you're going, these are just bad shit art jokes, man. You don't even, it's like, this is not interesting. You know? Art isn't, make art and create all you like, which is great. I like it. But, you know, real art is on about what's going on at the time. You know, was talking about the narrative that we're talking about now, or whatever it is. You know, it's identifying and acknowledging these things. You know, and this is where I kind of, like I've said to you for years, been on this kind of solo mission, and people are like now starting to go, you know, like all you hear about is AI, cyborgs, and I'm like, you know, the road's going to come to me soon, because it's like I'm one of the guys who's been there since 2008 doing this. You know, building that. You know, so it's like.
And I feel that a lot of a big issue I think of today, and maybe this has always been present, is people are afraid to be who they really are. People are afraid to embrace their weirdness to then create art. You know, like I think about myself, and as you were saying, like if you had your arms cut off of you, you would still find ways to do your art. And I think about, you know, my children. And I'm like, I come up with stories all the time. I'm a storyteller, you know, like it's just natural to me. Like I can just on the fly, like I can, sometimes I trick my wife and I'm like, hey, you want to know this interesting fact? And I'm like, just like coming up with amazing things in my mind and I'm sharing them with her. And she's like, is that real? She was like, oh, wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that was real. And I'm like, I just made it up. It's not real, you know. But then, like with my kids, you know, I'll make up, you know, these elaborate stories and stuff. And so I resonate with you when it comes to that. Like, that's just who I am. Like, even if I'm not writing stories, I'm still like in my mind, I'm a storyteller. And so what I'm getting at here is I feel what stops a lot of people is that there's like a governor, you know how like there's a governor in a car that doesn't let you go over a certain speed limit. I feel like society metaphorically places a governor in our consciousness that, hey, you can't go past this limit. If you go past this limit, you're going to be ostracized, you know? And I feel like people aren't willing to break out of their cages, if you will, to explore true creativity.
You're talking to the right man. You know what I mean? It's like, I had a choice. You know, it's like, you know, God bless my hometown, but I was like, I'm not the same as anybody I grew up with here. You know what I mean? I've got to go. You know, I've got to take a chance. I've got to go and be Holodonto, man. I've got to, like, you know, build up my vision and get my vision out to the world. You know what I mean? And just like, and bang on every door. You know, and build up my vision, and I have to, because that's, you know, it gives resonance to my mind. It gives resonance to my life. It gives meaning to my life. You know, it makes me, you know, this is it. You know, and I think it's like my niece. You know, like my niece is 11 years old, and I'm like, she's like mathematically a bit of a genius. She's brilliant, but I was like buying her skulls and like teaching her the Loomis method. I said, keep drawing, do your maths, just keep drawing and read books. I don't buy her toys, I buy her books, you know what I mean? I was buying all of this stuff because I'm like, you need, and ingraining that into it. I says, look, you need to fill that, not just sit there and do that, which is nothing wrong with doing that, but just, you've got to fill your head with words, you've got to fill your head with drawing, you've got to fill your head with all these things, because these are key, it's magic. It's magic.
Right. Yeah.
Well, you need it. You need it in your life. You don't just want to sit and be docile and just like watching a screen and being told like you're entertained. No.
Yeah.
You know, it's not.
You're touching on something very important here, and I think that, you know, this is my children aren't old enough for this yet, but this is going to be my parenting approach, and that is to allow them to wonder. And like, for an example, like, you know, if they ask me a question, what is the sun? I want to be able to ask, instead of like, oh, it's, you know, they say it's this, you know, big gas ball that's shooting out flames and it heats up the earth. I want to ask them, hey.
It sounds like an evil god.
I want to be like, hey, what do you think it is? Let your imagination explore.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like, what do you think the moon is? What do you think the stars are? Like, maybe they're not maybe what you're saying isn't technically right, but have the courage to wonder and explore, and don't be afraid to, you know, think differently than everybody else. Because I do feel that we all are original thinkers. I do feel like we all have the potential to look at the world in a unique way, but we get filtered in through society. But then that's where people like yourself come into play, because you can then, you know, shift the Overton window by the cyborg art, you know, like somebody who's like who's been filtered through society and has that governor, but then they can look at your art or somebody else's artwork, and then for a brief moment in time, it's gone, and they can explore the world in a different way, which is why I think, you know, what you're doing is incredibly important. And I do feel that, you know, your timing is impeccable, even though, you know, you said that you were here in 2008 doing this and nobody was paying attention. It was right at the beginning, you know, like this movement. It's been taking place for years now. Like, it goes all the way back to Huxley, and probably even back to the Greeks, as you were mentioning before. Yeah. But I think Huxley, was it Julius Huxley that came up with the term?
Aldous Huxley. Aldous Huxley.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So,
because he wrote the book. What's the book? This is annoying me. I know the book. I've read the book.
Well, I'm sure if anybody Googles Huxley transhumanism, they'll come up with the book or whatever it was. But I do know what you're talking about as well. It doesn't come to my mind either. Yeah, so like, you know, 2008 was the perfect time for this, because that's, ironically enough, or coincidentally enough, that's when Bitcoin came out. You know, so like, these big ideas came out at the same time, and it's very interesting how that works out in life. So
yeah, it's like there's a few, you know, people like my friend, a good friend of mine, Dr. Trudy Barber, and she was like one of the first women to make the first sex environment in VR, you know, when she worked with this company back in London in 1998, you know. So it's like I'm surrounded by a good few friends who've been populating this kind of space. And when I came down to London and stuff, and I remember meeting Trudy, and I'd done that talk with Warren Ellis, and she was like, there's so many parallels to me and your thinking, and, you know, what you're addressing in your work with the body and the flesh, you know. And it was like, because for a while when I was living in London, Lewis, I was like, does anybody know what I'm talking about? Is there anybody who's into this? And I met my friend Luke Robert Mason, who was like the head of this Virtual Futures, and he was like, I says, look, you need to talk to me. I've got a manifesto about cyborgs. You know, I'm doing art. And he's like, sure, come up. And me and him have been friends ever since, you know what I mean? And so I've kind of managed to find my people, but it was difficult for a while, you know. Like, I'd be going to these galleries going, I'm doing cyborgs, and he's going, oh, what is this, comic art? And you're like, no, it's no comic art. It's, you know, it's the philosophy. There's, you know, it's happening. And sometimes you're just like, nobody's getting this. Nobody's understanding this. Nobody's understanding. Either I'm just bonkers. And that's when I would start thinking, has my brain injury completely minced my brain? Or am I just, you know, what is going on here? So, I mean, it was like, you know, walking a road less traveled, you know what I mean? And it was like, but I've stuck to it, you know what I mean? I was like, no, I know this is the modern art. This is the neo-Renaissance. This is what I'm doing. You know, there's a few artists around me from the 90s who have been there. So all of us, and, you know, collectively are all part of this synergy towards this narrative that we see now, you know. And I
When
feel
did you actually write the manifesto, and how long did it take you?
I mean, it's the manifesto is kind of like a poetic treatise in a way. So for me, it was like taking me about 3 months, you know, because I was really kind of digesting a lot of the things that I was reading, you know, and a lot of things that I was processing in my head. And it was really weird how I just come to this conclusion that I was going to write this manifesto. I was like, I'm writing a manifesto, and I wasn't even aware of Donna Haraway at the time, you know what I mean? Like, who wrote the Cyborg manifesto from the 80s. I wasn't even aware of her at all. You know, I was like, as I said, it was kind of like I've come into this kind of, I never came into the Cyborg just at uni. It was always been with me, if that makes sense. But I think one of the most prominent things was when I was reading the book, it was the last year I was at uni, and it was basically talking about RoboCop as an allegory for Jesus Christ, you know, which is a very, very interesting. And I was like, this is kind of what I'm thinking about, you know what I mean, about the idea of the flesh, the body, the metamorphosis and stuff like that. And it wasn't until I actually finished uni that this became kind of my focus, you know, of what the Cyborg was. And as I said, a lot of them were stark drawings, and there was no, you know, there was no kind of, I wasn't referencing anything. There were all these like stark one line drawings. So there was a kind of, you know, an evolution and a process of how this was evolving and what the vision was going to be. And the way I'm looking at it now, it's like, you know, this opera that I've written is basically the extension of my manifesto, you know what I mean, in a way. And all the other poetic pieces that I write, because I kind of see that mines are like kind of more, it's more poetic, as opposed to being it's not because it's not academic, but it's not like academic. It's not academic books that I'm writing. No, I like the kind of abstract notion.
Yeah, I think that you can actually find the manifesto, and didn't you? I don't know if you created it, but there's a virtual reality, there's a VR world that you can go into that has some of your pieces, and I believe the manifesto is on the wall, like as soon as you see it.
Yeah, that's my website you went into. Is that right?
Okay.
Yeah,
I think so.
The manifesto.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I put the manifesto in the virtual gallery. Yeah, for sure. I wanted to do. I meant to be releasing some NFTs next year, so I think I'm going to do a presentation as an avatar, as a cyborg avatar. So, and I'm going to do the manifesto, I think, in there. So I'll definitely keep you in the loop about that for sure.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Definite. So, man, where can people find you and stay up to date with your work?
If you go to Holodonto in Google, it'll come up everywhere. Holodonto Twitter, Holodonto Instagram, holodonto.com. You know, there's, you know, it's not difficult to find me. I'm very present, you know what I mean, on online, you know, with my work.
One last question. I was going to end it there, but I meant to ask this earlier. Where did the name Holodonto come from? What, you know, how did that come to be?
Right. Well, I kind of touched on a bit of it earlier. Like, so like for me, so my full name is Graham Gerard Halliday. So, but Holodonto is a name, an avatar, a character, a personality I've created for an amalgamation of personalities that I think I have. You know, like when I said I had an Italian accent, I could use chopsticks. You know, when I was younger, I used to get the school photograph and put a bingo pen on everybody's face to leave my face. So there's this kind of this amalgamation of these various personalities of who Hallidonto is. So Hallidonto is someone but no one at the same time.
Fascinating. Well,
you know.
man, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. I've had a lot of fun
Absolutely.
during this conversation, so I really thank you for coming on the show.
I really appreciate being invited to come on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, man. As always, you're very erudite and excellent questions, and I hope we keep in touch as well, and I'll definitely keep you updated about what I'm doing and stuff for sure. And I'll
Awesome.
definitely
Yes.
send you that reading list.
Awesome.
You know,
Do that. We will definitely stay
really
in
do
touch.
appreciate it, mate.